Few things are for sure in this life, but this is. If we live for any substantial amount of time, we will encounter grief due to the loss of a loved one. Not something any of us ever want, and we all handle it differently. This podcast is to feature those who have done purposeful and meaningful things through their grief. These people featured on here are normal folks, just like you and me, who were thrust into a place they never wanted to be in their lives. A painful place. As they move through their pain, they realize that something worthwhile, something for the greater good, could come out of the unthinkable. I'm sure that none of them would ever consider themselves to be a hero, but when I searched the definition of the word hero, I found this: a person who is admired or idolized for courage, outstanding achievements, or noble qualities. And that fit. And so it's my privilege to bring you the remarkable stories of these heroes in grief. Hi, everyone. This is Tom, your host for the Heroes in Grief podcast, and the response has been incredible so far, and I want to thank you for that. It's getting out to people, and they're letting us know that it's helping them, and that is what it's all about. I want to make you aware of a way that you can support this podcast without having to spend 1 cent, and that is through affiliate marketing. I've set up affiliate marketing for online shopping. If you do online shopping, then I have links to all the major retailers, most of them anyways, and I can provide them for you so that when you buy online through those links, you'll help support the podcast through the percentages that we get. It doesn't cost you anything more. You just shop like you regularly would on the sites that you love. It's very easy. All you have to do is shop. And that's it. Just let me know the links to the places that you want to shop at, and I will provide the affiliate links so that you can do it. If you want more information on this, you can go to heroesandgrief.com. It takes you to the Linktree page where a video explains it in a little more detail. But you can always email me at tom@heroesandgrief.com, and I can answer questions for you. But you can support the podcast that way, and it's very easy, very simple, and it doesn't cost you a cent. Isn't that great? Thank you. Now here's today's episode.
Yes.
Good to meet you. How are you?
Same. I'm good. I'm okay.
Good.
How about you?
Hanging in there. We're in Western New York here. We got brutal weather. It's Memorial Day weekend, and today is going to maybe hit 50, and we've had rain.
Yeah, I mean, we're in Virginia, and it's cold. Like, it's cold for here.
Yeah.
So,
we've had rain forever. It's been gray and rainy forever, it seems. Oh, well. Maybe we can bring some brightness to people today. How about that?
Absolutely.
Sound good?
Yeah.
All right. So, Liz, we are getting acquainted here. And I love this. I love to do it just this way, where I really don't. I mean, I look at your site and things like that, but I don't do deep dives because I want you to tell your story and to explain what you do. This is a big commercial for you. So that makes it, and people are usually good talking about themselves. So, that works good. So anyways, if you wouldn't mind sharing, what got you into grief work, if that was a grief story or what happened there, or, if you want to share those, because, I've learned that you learn something from people's stories for sure. And then I want to focus and highlight what people are doing in the grief resources realm.
Yeah, absolutely. So grief started for me at an early age, to be honest. I lost my grandma when I was 10. And I didn't realize the impact that would have on me until years later when I would lose more important people in my life. So I lost my grandma when I was 10, and that was probably my first real grief experience that I even then could acknowledge that it hurt and it was hard. And then we lost our firstborn daughter, Alivia, in 2008. She was an unexpected pregnancy. We had just been married for like 3 months. So we were not intentionally getting pregnant, but life happens. And she was a welcomed blessing after we got over the initial, like, oh my gosh, we're pregnant. Everything up for my pregnancy was pretty much normal as can be for pregnancy. It wasn't until I was in labor and giving birth when I wouldn't say that we noticed something wrong, but doctors around us did. I was in the middle of pushing when things started to kind of take a turn. I think doctors started to swarm just because she was getting stuck in the canal and things like that. Alivia was born with a slight heartbeat, but not breathing. So she was immediately taken to the NICU, where she would then spend the next 34 hours basically on observation, just to see if she would shift, because babies are really resilient and they can really change in a matter of 24 hours, depending on, their condition and medical staff. Unfortunately, that was not the case with our daughter. Alivia was technically, in all sense, had no brain activity. And so she lived on a breathing tube for 34 hours until the breathing tube had moved into her esophagus. And we could either re-intubate and just keep having her with us for as long as we wanted, or this we took as a sign from her that it was time to say goodbye. At this point, we already knew that she was not going to make it, and that we were just kind of holding on for a couple more hours or moments to hold her and be with her. So July 3rd is when she was born, and she passed away on July 24th at 6 p.m. in my husband's arms. So that's probably
So tough.
and that's probably the first real big loss. I mean, I know I talk about my grandma, but I think I talk about my grandma's impact more, and the fact that it seems really parallel, because if you flash forward, I also lost both of my parents. So it's parallel to my children losing their grandparents, and that's how I can see the impact with my grandma. Losing Alivia, our daughter, was our first true grief loss, the heartache, the devastation that you feel of losing a child.
Yeah.
I didn't know it then how much it would impact me and through my life, because when you lose a child, you don't know what it's going to do. You don't know what you're going to navigate. You don't know anything really. It's hard to even just pick up the pieces and move forward. Somehow, some way we do, because the alternative is not. And that wasn't something I wanted to do. I mean, yes, there was definitely days I stayed in bed, but I at least was choosing to just lay in bed instead of something else. And then again, move forward about my dad died in 2018, and then my mom died in 2020. And I would say the loss of my parents is kind of what triggered me into this grief space. Grief has always been a part of our life, part of my family, just because of Alivia. I have 3 children that have gone on, as they call, rainbow babies. And they know of their big sister all the time. They have known Alivia as their sister. We hang her up in pictures on our picture wall. She's just a constant in our life. So grief has always been there because of that. And then losing my parents kind of spiraled me into that, there's a lot of loss. There's a lot of grief. There's a lot of people that have stories that deserve to be heard. Similar to what you're doing with your podcast, Tom, I have a podcast that's called Healing Hearts Podcast. And it's very similar, that it's just a space for you to come and share your story of love, loss, and light. And whatever you want to share, you share, because everyone's story matters. Big, small, and even if you don't go and do something like a podcast or create a magazine or anything like that out of your grief, it still deserves to be heard. And that's what the podcast for me was created, is that people who have lost someone that just want to say their child or loved one's name, they should be able to do that.
Yeah, I think people too. It's too faceted, right? The person who's telling the story, you may not realize this out there, but you do need to tell your story. It needs to be witnessed. It needs to be heard, and you need to get that out. That's part of a good normal process through grief. And then the story, you said, that meant so much to me in the early times too, just hearing people's stories. And, of course, nobody's circumstance is the same, but it didn't matter. You had someone who understood to some degree what you were going through. And I always found something in their story to take out of it to apply to me. And that was remarkable to me, and kind of where the idea for this came from. That, like you said, you realize that, and it's wow, we got to keep getting this out there,
Yeah, absolutely.
How long is I'm sorry,
Nope,
how long has the podcast been going on?
We have been a little over a year. I started in March of 2024. So
Yeah,
headed
mine's late
into,
April, so from last year, about the same
yeah,
time. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. It's been beautiful. I'm sure, as you can attest, that it's healing not only for others to come on, but also for myself.
Yeah.
I've learned so much about grief and about myself's journey just through doing the podcast. It's just been really wonderful.
Yeah.
Do not
I had, go ahead.
take what I do and listening to those stories for granted, because I think it's just to be able to be in this, to create this space is so sacred.
Yeah. I had loved ones around me concerned about me
Mm.
taking the steps. I took a grief educator course shortly after Jeff passed. And then I wanted to get in the grief space as well. And that's where the podcast idea came up relatively quickly. And legitimately they had concerns about me being in that space. Is that going to drum up the same for you all the time and everything? And I want to tell you that it does. It
Yeah.
does. But I have found it to be a good thing for me, because here I am 2 years down the line. And there's been times through that 2 years where I really felt like I was cruising pretty good. And recently, it's hit me pretty hard. Even today, I posted a post about it. And, it's hit me harder. And I think it's good, though. I feel good when I'm in that space and dealing with it, and feeling the love and all of that. And there's pain, of course, but the love is greater. And, it hurts, but I would rather be there than be, I don't know, I guess, oblivious to it or whatever and not dealing with it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think society and people around us kind of tell us we should avoid it. We should just bury it. And when in reality, no, you need to walk through it. You need to walk through those feelings and that pain, because like you said, on the other side is love, and love is greater.
Yeah.
And I think once you do go through those feelings, as hard as they are, as vulnerable as they are, you come out, I don't want to say better, because better is the wrong word. And I don't want to say stronger, because it's not necessarily the right word either, but you just feel different, but an okay different.
Yeah.
So,
A tolerable one. Right.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Because
Yeah.
grief isn't going to unchange you. I mean, you're going to be changed with grief. It's just going to happen. It's the same thing with love. You're not unchanged because you love someone. They're
Mm-hmm.
become a part of you. So it's the same thing with grief. So
That's a great point. Did you do anything else with, grief work or anything like that? Or did you just
I,
start the podcast or?
As for the very beginning, it was just the podcast. I mean, a lot of it in the beginning was just work on myself, to be honest. After I lost my parents, your identity, when you lose your parents, you just kind of lose pieces of who you are and your identity.
Mhm.
So much of who we are wrapped up in our parents. One of the big things that I focused on after losing, especially my mom, because after losing her, it was just me and I had no parents. I focused on my health. I realized that I've always been kind of overweight, but never really felt uncomfortable being overweight, because no one ever told me I was. My parents loved me for who I was unconditionally. My husband didn't care. We were just happy, but I just kind of started to feel uncomfortable in my own skin. So grief work really kind of started for me by just starting to show up for myself differently. And by doing that through health and wellness and working out and stuff like that, I started to peel off the layers of grief that smothered me those
Mhm.
first several months. And that's where I started to kind of like crack open a little bit and started to realize that I wanted to do more than, as much as I loved being a mom, I was just a stay at home mom at the time. And I wanted to do more while being able to show my kids that we can do really cool things, you know. And so that's kind of where it started. I started working out and doing all of those things. And that kind of cracked the layer of like, grief can be work and we can do. So that's where the podcast came. And then just recently, I've started to do more writing and have a blog that I share a little bit everything on the blog. A lot of it's grief and loss, but some of it's a little bit of motherhood and mental health, because it all kind of just ties together. And then I am in the stories of friends and family lost, book that Trueness created and that I'm in with you. And that's just been a remarkable experience to share my mom and dad's story, because not only did they're a perfect example of how love lives on. They had a remarkable love story that continues even today after their passing. And I think I'm really grateful that I was able to share that with the world.
That's great. Yeah, it's manifesting itself in you in so many healthy ways, and that's great. And that underlying theme comes through a lot about having, doing good things for yourself to help yourself in the grief space or when you're suffering in grief. And so that's always good advice to have and to help yourself. It raises your levels of things that you need to process things better and everything else, and makes you feel better just for even those moments, if that's where you're at. So it can help you in that way. That is great. Yeah, the book, that's been an interesting process. I never thought about doing that. And, Trueness touched base with me before the first book, and I couldn't do it then, and then came back to me. And, I was like, well, I don't know about this writing thing or whatever. So I kind of just, it did come out, and that was great. And I liked what happened with it. And, but that's an interesting process, and Jeff certainly wouldn't want to be featured like that in his life, that's for sure. But I think the byproducts of doing that and something like that, he would want, and he did want from people. So that is, I guess, my justification maybe for that.
Yeah.
But, that's been great. Did you find it difficult to write the story?
I did. To take me back in that area was definitely difficult. And to really think about, because I started at the very beginning. I started at the beginning of my dad and he walking into the bar where he met my mom, and he went home that evening and told his roommate that he met the woman he was going to marry. And so, it's such a remarkable story because it ended up, they did get married and they had a beautiful life together, not without complications and ups and downs and all the things so I had to think about the stories that they would tell me. I didn't live that experience with them, but my dad told that story all the time to everybody because, and then just to think about growing up where their love story had their ups and downs, and where I saw the love just in general everyday experiences, and it was hard to write it because they're no longer here. But it also was really beautiful to go back and to think about them in that space, to remember those moments again.
Yeah, I love that, because my thinking of the hard part was that I was reliving the occurrence of what happened and everything. And so you bring a whole different perspective with that. And that's the wonder of it all, right? That people just are different and they bring a different thing. And there you are, your hard part was the memories and great memories, but still hard. And so that's I love that people can identify with so many different things, and they may have had experience like that in their life, and so they'll gravitate to the things you're doing, and that's great. We all have room in this grief space. There can never be enough, that's for sure. So you've what kind of, I guess, talking about the podcast, have you had any interesting guests, things that have come out of that and maybe you didn't anticipate or surprised you?
Not really yet. We were still this is season 3, which I'm officially recording now. I think is where I'm getting out of my comfort zone, and I'm willing to just ask anyone. And if they say no, then they say no. Before, I was kind of playing it safe and asking people I already knew in the grief space, or people that, you know what I mean? I remember, one of the, Chelsea, the one that wrote the Harsh and Hope Realities book. I asked her to be on the blog, and I have followed her and loved her since my dad died, because her mom and my dad died right around the same time. So a lot of the things that she was sharing about her mom related because of just having losing a parent. And so when I asked her to be on the podcast, I remember like fangirling because it was just a really cool moment that she said yes. And now it's kind of where I'm at, like moving forward. I don't mind asking people that, like, I only have like 500 followers and I'm asking people that have hundreds. And I'm like, well, if they say no, then they say no. Who cares? Like, and so like, I think there's so much growth in that, like the confidence I'm building, and I just love the guests that I'm having. They share just different insight and all the things. So I'm just really excited for the future, honestly.
Hello, friends. I just wanted to take a brief break here in the podcast to make you aware of a very exciting partnership that Heroes in Grief has just formed, and that is with Get Griefy magazine. I'm going to let their founder and editor-in-chief, Kara Sanchez, tell you all about it.
Hey, Heroes in Grief listeners. Life after loss isn't easy, but it can be colorful and full of possibilities. Meet Get Griefy magazine, a vibrant resource filled with inspiring stories of life after loss, expert advice, and voices from everyday grievers and thought leaders. Together, they're here to help guide you toward the side of life that's left to be lived fully and authentically. Dive into Get Griefy for free on issue or snag a print copy on Amazon. Connect with us on Instagram at Get Griefy Magazine or visit getgriefymagazine.com to explore, join our thriving small business collective, or discover advertising opportunities. Let's embrace life after loss, boldly and together.
And now back to our episode. Yeah, I think I found most everybody to be very gracious in the community. Yeah. So don't worry about that. Just go for it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's how life should go, honestly. We live this life once.
Yeah. And who knows why they're saying no if they say no. There could be many reasons. We always tend to take it personally maybe, but it's not usually the case.
Right. It's the same thing that, like, when you're talking to someone and you're, be kind because you don't know what their story is. It's the same thing. We don't know what they're going through, why they're saying no. You know, they could have a boundary where they're doing too much and they can't say yes to everything. So.
Yep. Are you involved with Get Griefy too?
Yes. Yeah. So a part of the Get Griefy small business collective. And then I have been in the magazine a few times and things like that. So, which Great. I think is just a wonderful community, and so grateful that Kira created that space for us to share and collab and all of the things.
Yeah, she was gracious with me for sure. She, we do a spot for her on the podcast here, and she's allowed me to be part of the collective. And, it's amazing. I say they're all rock stars.
Yeah, absolutely.
You talk about the levels that some of them are at, and, but when it comes down to it, they're in the same place, a lot of times because their experiences have caused them to be where they are. And so you tend to see that everyone is kind of on even ground when it comes down to that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we all have the same goal, and it's just to share that grief and loss doesn't need to be this hidden taboo subject. It needs to be shared and loved and honored and witnessed.
Yeah, that's for sure. What, you have any aspirations to do other things, or you find where you are, or what's...
Currently, I am in the works of doing another book doing another book collaboration where I will share Alivia's story this time. Oh. And so I'm pretty excited and nervous about that because that will just be a whole nother, I think that's the one that you talk about how you felt it was really hard to go back and relive that moment with your son. I think that's what's going to be for me with Alivia. I don't, we talk about it and we share about it with the kids, but to like go back and put myself there again to write this story, I think will be difficult, but necessary because I think it's important to share her story. But again, so I have that coming up, and then I don't know. I really have learned that I enjoy writing. So I don't know if I'll ever write my own book. There's sometimes I think about kind of doing similar to what Trueness did and do what we kind of do with the podcast, take the podcast stories and make them into a book, because I think there's never enough books like that. I think books like that are important, and they show vulnerability and just human experience is always important.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. You touched on something, or when you talked about, I guess, your situation. Unfortunately, in society, they may take losses differently, and prioritize them or say that one's greater than another. I will sit here and say right now that there is no difference you losing your child after one day than me losing one after 27 years. There is no
and I will
difference
agree with you
whatsoever.
wholeheartedly.
Yeah. And people, society, unfortunately, because of the stigma and it being shelved and, whatever, I just want to verbalize that, because you don't have to go into great, battling detail about it or anything. It's the same. And people
Yeah,
say to me sometimes, well, that's the greatest loss. And I said, no, it isn't. Your loss is the greatest loss. That's the
absolutely.
greatest loss, because perhaps someone never had a child or something, and so whoever the loved one that they lose is their loss, and so it's no different there, and this
No.
prioritizing or whatever is ridiculous.
Yeah, this comparison or anything. It's grief is grief, and grief is your grief, and however you're going to process and acknowledge and do and witness is yours, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's as unique as your fingerprint. So
Yeah. And I love the way you're keeping Olivia's legacy alive. That's great with your other children and everything. Actually, my ex-wife did a great job with that. Her brother died at 13 years old of a heart condition, and I never knew him. I came into her life afterwards, but she did a fantastic job, and her family actually did, keeping his legacy alive. And my children, like Jeffrey's middle name was Chad. That was Chad who passed away. And so, I mean, and my daughter, I adopted her. She was my ex's biological daughter, but I raised her, and she, to this day, Chad is involved in her life, and so, that was very effectively done and very important. And so I commend you for doing that for sure too.
thank you. I didn't know I was going to do it until it just kind of happened. I think one of the very first experiences I had was when you get asked that question, how many children you have. And I did get that question shortly after I lost Olivia. And I remember saying none, because at the time I didn't have a baby. Like, I didn't
Yeah.
feel like a mother, but I do remember immediately returning to my car and bawling my eyes out, because I denied her, and she made me a mom. And so I knew in that moment I would never deny her again. And we just kind of continued to honor her that first year of her life after, in our own life, and just like me and my husband's. And it just kind of rippled into the rest of it once we had more children.
Mm-hmm.
And so it just she just becomes this part of, she's this girl. I've never forced my kids to acknowledge her. That's their job. She's part of the family. But if they don't want to draw her in our family picture, I'm not going to be like, you forgot your sister, because I don't want that on them either. But I've never had to. They've always included her. Every kindergarten, come home and draw your picture and da da da. They always have drawn Olivia up in the sky with her butterfly wings, and then had to go explain to their class and their teacher who their family is. And they will all just say, this is my sister Olivia in heaven. And I usually get an email and being like, so, hey, hi. But most of the time kindergartners don't care. They're just like, okay, cool. You have a sister that lives in heaven. Kids are so, resilient. And so just like, that's cool. It wasn't until I think when my son was in fourth grade and he had to write about his family, and he had to write about his sister, and he had to like, that was a little more detailed. I remember giving the teacher more of a heads up of like, he's going to write about his sister because it's part of our family, and just want you to know that like, this could be a little heavy for fourth graders.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's good. Let's maybe we can send a little help to those who would struggle with that question that you said. So how do you answer that question now? How many children do you have?
Honestly, it kind of depends. I never not say 4. I will always say 4, but sometimes depending on the person, the situation, who I can say 4, 3 here, 1 in heaven, or sometimes it is just as simple as 4. And if they ask me more questions, then I'll go into greater detail. But it's always 4. And I think it's honestly, it's when you're comfortable to answer that question and how you want to answer it. It is okay for you to say, I don't want to answer that question today. I think there's nothing wrong with that. And if they give you a look or you can wonder, you can just be like, I had a loss and I'm not comfortable talking about it. There's nothing wrong with that. I know a friend of mine that has lost her daughter and she can't say her name. They named her, but she can't physically say her name out loud. And it's been 4 years. And that's okay. She gets, so there's no manual, there's no timeline, there's no right or wrong way to do anything, to answer any question, anything like that. I just learned early that I wasn't going to deny her because it happened to me early. Getting that question asked so early, months after she passed away, was just enough for me to be like, I can't say no, or I can't say I don't have her. Just as we've gotten through it, and it's been 16 years, almost 17 years, I definitely have just kind of learned to read the person that I'm talking to, that if I feel comfortable sharing more, or if, not that we should care about making them comfortable, but sometimes you just don't want to go through that situation either. So then I don't answer it a certain way just because I don't want to make them uncomfortable, which is, that's again, another personal choice. If you don't care and you're like, whatever, they can be uncomfortable, go for it. I've done that too.
Oh yeah. You get to that point, don't you? Where you're just like,
Yeah.
I don't give a rip about anything today.
Exactly. So you have to in reality, for me, I always read the room. I kind of read where I am, and that's how I answer that question. It's how I answer a lot of grief questions, to be honest, just because you never know what's going to be asked. If they know of your loss, you can be asked anything, which I think is just also crazy.
Yeah. Where is the question would be, I guess, how is your grief, or where is your grief for Alivia 16 years down the line?
Everywhere. I mean, honestly, it's so true. I'm definitely not in that raw numbness pain that you are in those first several months to a year. But there are still days that it knocks me on my feet, and how much I miss her. Beginning of the school year is always hard, because I know she should be going to school. Next year, this upcoming year, will be difficult because she'd be a senior in high school. She'd be entering her senior year. So I know that watching friends that have seniors and things like that this will be an emotional milestone year for us, just because we should have a daughter graduating. And honestly, I see her every day because I see her and her siblings. They talk about her. I see my children's grief for her as well, which is something that I didn't anticipate. Losing Alivia, honestly, I didn't think about their grief until they started showing symptoms of grief for their sister. And it was just a whole new wave of like, oh yeah, they're going to have something, even though they didn't meet her. She's still so present in our lives. They're going to feel emotions about that.
Yeah, there's an absence. There's an absence there.
Yeah. And so that's something that I didn't anticipate navigating, which is
that's a great point right there. That certainly is not talked about very much.
No, not at all. It's definitely something I intend to share a little bit more when I share Olivia's story into the book that I'm collaborating with, just because I think it is something that needs to be talked about. And a lot of it comes back to like my daughter, who's 14. She reflects a lot on the fact that she'd have an older sister to relate to go through, to share a room with. those are the things that she thinks about. And those are the things that she has brought up that have really just like made me realize how much grief they do carry. There's a commercial when we were watching TV one night, and there's a commercial on there about like children that have RSV, they can take like some medicine or something like that to help them and stuff. And it talks about like not breathing and all the things. And that's the story my kids know. You know what I mean? Of like, she was born not breathing, had a small heartbeat, blah, blah, blah. And my 7-year-old was like, maybe if they had this medicine, it could have saved Alivia.
Mm-hmm. And that's an activating thing for them. That
yes,
yeah.
I mean, what a beautiful thought.
Yeah.
That like but again, that's grief he's carrying.
That is such a specialized area. I think that would be a great focus area for somebody that had the desire to go into helping in something specific, because for instance, I find a hard time finding someone to help me with my grandson. Jeff has a son, and he's now 13. And so, but Jeff was not acquainted with him in his life, unfortunately. Okay. So I have become acquainted with him since, and I'm in his life now. But there's a unique dynamic there because he really didn't know his dad. So, whenever there's those niche areas or whatever that someone could focus on to help, that's always a great thing. So, maybe I'm not saying that you're going to take that on. You certainly got good background in that. That's
yeah,
wonderful.
And I definitely have shared a little bit more of it recently. I'm still just navigating it with my own kids, Yeah. So it's difficult to like, and I feel like someone who narrows that down, I know there's definitely work to be done in that, just because they're the generation that's going to carry it forward. I've always had there's generational
raising
grief.
awareness. That's what it's all about, right?
There's generational grief, and I think about it even in the sense as a mom and a woman. And my daughter, when she gets pregnant, how scared will she be of losing her child because her mom lost one? Like,
that could be something
there's just
pervading
so much.
all the time,
Yeah.
Do you celebrate the milestones and things of Olivia's milestones?
We do. For the first year, me and my husband celebrated every month. That was just one way we coped through things. And we would do a balloon release and stuff. Back then when they were, now it's not as popular to do them because it's not as safe for the environment. So I'm not suggesting you do them. But
I won't tell anybody.
We did do them in the very beginning, 16 years ago. And then that first Christmas, I didn't want anything to do with celebrating, which makes complete sense. I told my mom, I'm not, we don't need a tree. We don't need anything. We're just good. And moms tend to know a little better and a little best. And growing up, we always had a teddy bear tree when I was a kid. And my mom had a 6-foot tree lit up with a bunch of white lights and a bunch of teddy bears on it. It was just in the kitchen. It was just a beautiful tree. And she's like, I know you said you don't want a tree or whatever. And we were visiting, and she packed everything that goes in that teddy bear tree except the teddy bears in the back of our car. And she's like, you never know, you might change your mind. And lo and behold, she must have known better, because I was sitting one day and I was like, fine, I'm just going to set up this tree and see what it looks like. It just felt like the house needed something because we had nothing up. And so I set up the tree, and it was this little 6-foot tree with little white lights on it. And then we went and bought a bunch of like ornaments that would represent Alivia. So butterflies and angels and white ornaments and silver ornaments, and decorated her tree. And it became Olivia's angel tree, and we have been doing it ever since. It is great. Probably one of our favorite holiday traditions that we do as a family. The kids help us set it up. They have we buy an ornament every year to add to it as a family. So it's one of our favorite things. And then we do celebrate her birthday every year. Usually we just do like a family picnic in a park and just kind of hang out and do things, stuff like that. We've done kindness rocks before. So we've made like rocks and put them on the hike that we're walking that have like Olivia's name or something that represents Alivia. So we just do a little bit of different things.
Yeah. And we're, whatever anybody's comfortable with, right? As far as that goes, we've commemorated Jeff's birthday going to Longhorn Steakhouse where we used to go all the time and eat steak. And that's what we do. Nothing dramatic or anything, but we get together.
Yeah, it
and
doesn't have to
usually,
be big and fancy. It can be whatever you
and
want.
whatever you're comfortable with, whatever suits your situation.
Exactly.
So that's wonderful. Yeah, great. Liz, thank you. This has been great. I love some of the things that have come out of this and that are unique for people too, that always help. So
Yeah.
that's, like you said, you tell the story. I never anticipated, that situation with your children, thinking about Alivia and that type of thing coming out of this. And that's what happens every time, something applicable and unique and that somebody can gravitate to. And our hopes are that it helps them along the way, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, we will stay connected. I know that. So we'll have links to your things, of course, in the show notes and everything. And I encourage everybody to go to your podcast. It's the Healing Hearts podcast. Is it available everywhere? Is it on?
Should be.
You do video?
No, just right now I just do audio.
I
haven't figured out how to do the editing of video quite yet.
Yeah. Let me know. I might be able to help you with that. There's some good programs out there and stuff. So if you want to, just hit me up. But everyone go to the Healing Hearts podcast and then subscribe on there. And you can I imagine people can reach you through there, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
All right. Fantastic. And we'll get your website up there for sure, or the bio site you have. So, all right. Thank you, Liz Quinn. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
All right. You have a great day.
You too. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to the Heroes in Grief podcast. If you'd like access to any of the links that we discussed in today's show, you can find them in the show notes. There's also a link there to support the podcast if you care to. And there is an email link for me there. I'd love to hear from you and your ideas about the show or what you thought about the show. You really can help out this podcast to get to more people if you subscribe, rate, or review it in whichever way your platform provides. Each week, Heroes in Grief is released on Sunday, so look for new episodes there. Thank you again for listening to Heroes in Grief.